All right. We're back again for another session, another fun one on spirits in the material world. I'm your host, Sean Blankenship, and today we've got an awesome surprise for everybody. None other than Geoff Calkins from the Bluff City itself. We are in Memphis, and we're going to kick back and we're going to listen to how somebody with two Harvard degrees from a blue collar city in New York with similar personality to the Bluff City got into journalism. So Geoff, I'm going to and if I if my research went off the cliff somewhere, just jump in.
Okay, I have to tell you, there's another Geoff Calkins out there, and I went to his wedding last week.
Oh, this is
literally same Geoff, same spelling, but it's my nephew, and what's outrageous is he has my Twitter handle. So the Geoff Calkins on Twitter is my nephew. He had the gall to steal it before I could get it. And so I have to be Geoff_Calkins. And they're both Geoff, which is the tricky spelling to begin with. And he's much more successful than I am. So you've got the wrong Geoff Calkins, but I'm happy. And so if at any point you start to talk about an entrepreneur who has made a fortune in healthcare, I'll know you've gone and stumbled on the wrong one. Yeah, exactly. The tech guy.
That's interesting. Now, I can't imagine if he was sitting here with us. We really have a hard time.
Well, it gets confusing with emails too, honestly. It does get confusing with emails in the family. And there's another Geoff. I have another nephew, Geoff, but his last name isn't Calkins. And which is curious because there's no deep history of Geoffs in the family. My mom and dad just hit upon Geoff, and I've been cursed with this name, although I like it. But people don't know how to spell it. Nate Bargatze, the comedian, recently said on Saturday Night Live, there are two ways to spell Geoff. And someone said, well, what are they? He said, the short way with a J and the stupid way with a G. So I'm the stupid way with a G, but I don't want to interrupt the introduction. So fire away.
Well, you see, you're already creating rabbit holes because my first cousin's name's Geoff.
Oh, with a G?
With a G.
Oh, there you go. So, good for him. He's one of us, one of the tribe.
He's not really stupid.
No, that's good. Well, it's just the spelling. I think that's stupid. I think that builds character.
Well, let's do this. Let's start off with a little bit of background. So as I kind of indicated, originally from Buffalo, New York, which I said is sort of like an underdog city, just like Memphis, I guess, with the gritty spirit. Harvard graduate, Harvard Law School graduate, who obviously you found your way to journalism. Moved to Memphis 27 years ago.
Yeah, right. 29, I think. 29? 96. It was 96.
All right.
So what that got us, that's 29. Yeah.
And named best sports columnist in the U.S. 5 times from AP Sports.
APSE is the sports contest. It's the sports writers sports contest.
Okay. Inducted into the Scripps Hall of Fame of Journalism. Mm-hmm. Is that fair? All right. Won 5 Green Eye Shade Awards, which we'll get into.
Another. It's a regional.
Okay.
It's a regional award.
Got it. And published After the Jump, 2016, a book chronicling Memphis sports transformative years. Radio host, personality, radio host, talk show where you mix up analysis, humor, and you have guest segments. Mm-hmm. I listened to a little bit of that this morning on ESPN. Let's see. 2023, you transitioned from, I think, maybe more of a core focus in sports.
Yeah.
Which is when we met.
Right. More general interest stuff.
More general interest, local stories, inspiring local challenges, things like that around Memphis. Highlights unsung heroes like Central High's jazz band winning the national contest, which I remember that. That was recently. Yeah. Well, what else do we have? Father of 3 boys.
Correct.
And 2 shaggy Bernese mountain dogs, which I met Willow's.
You met Willow. Gus, I didn't. He's too big and bounding. I had when you came over, I had him confined. So, but Willow was here until I decided she was panting too loudly, and then we expelled her from the room as well.
And I found a little fun fact that I was going to ask you about. Once vowed to play Christmas carols on a tuba outside the FedEx Forum for if the Grizzlies extended
Their
a losing streak, and
yeah.
the Warriors coach used it as motivation.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a true story.
True story.
And yeah, so how did that go?
Yeah, what happened is that in the early years, the Grizzlies were terrible, and they had lost, I don't know, to start one season 9 straight games, and so they were to start the next season, they had already lost 7 straight games or something like that. And it gets to be difficult to figure out how to describe losses, what to write columns after losses. I was writing so many columns, sports columns back then. You're always just looking for something, stupid to say or original or fun, mildly funny or something. So I said, don't worry. If the Grizzlies lose 10 in a row to start the season, one more than they had the last year, I will play Christmas carols on my tuba outside the Pyramid, I think it was at the time, because it was really early. And so then what happened is that somehow, and I don't even know who the Warriors coach was at the time, I've lost track of it. He took the column when it came time for them to lose their 10th straight game. He took the column and he put it on the chairs of his players before the game. And he sort of said, let's make this guy play Christmas Carol on his tuba. And sure enough, the Warriors won. Antoine Jameson played for them that day, I remember. And he was like, he sunk a big 3-pointer and said something like, let's make him warm up that tuba. Like it did, like it was a ridiculous little thing. So the Warriors won, the Grizzlies lost. And so I was in a position where I had to play tuba in front of the stadium. And so now I played tuba as a kid. I was a pretty good tuba player when I was in high school, and I played a little bit in college, but I don't play very much anymore. I still have a tuba. And so what I decided to do was I called Charles Schultz, not the guy who does Peanut, but the guy, the lead tuba player, the tuba player of the Memphis Symphony. His name's Charles Schultz. And I called him and I said, I need some reinforcements. And you've heard of these tuba Christmases that they have around. Tubas get together. Lots of tuba players get together and play tubas. And so what I got like about 20 tuba players to join me. And it was
smart.
Fun. And it was fun. And I played maybe 1 or 2 things where I'd play a little bit on my own, but mostly I had total ringers with me, really good tuba players. And so we sounded good. The local TV was there and it was a little shtick and it was fun. And so it was a fun little thing to do with the column once upon a time.
That's awesome. Why not have fun, right?
Yep.
All right. I'd love to hear a little bit more about where you grew up. And were you into sports? Were you more of a scholastic guy? Just tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
Well, so I was the 8th of 9 children, and my dad was an academic in academic medicine. He was at the Mass General, Harvard Medical School, whatever, and then he got a job. The first 7 siblings were born in Boston, in the Boston area, and then he got a job running the Department of Medicine at SUNY Buffalo, State University of New York, Buffalo. And my mom was supposedly so depressed by this idea of up and moving her 7 children to Buffalo, for godforsaken Buffalo, which is how they thought of it at the time, that she said, I need another project. And so I was conceived in Boston and born in Buffalo. I was the project. Now, in the end, we loved Buffalo. It was a great place to grow up and probably better for a family of 9, honestly, than Boston. And so we had mom and dad were both doctors, honestly. Dad was an academic doctor. Mom was, she worked as a general practitioner at a state mental hospital, which then became a prison, because that's what America does. We turn instead of mental health care, we just prison people. And so so mom ended up being a prison doctor. But but we had a little farm. That was really the character of the place. Like my dad was a total cheapskate in the best sense of the word. He never bought a new car in his life, and he liked to do chores around the farm. And so we had sheep and chickens and horses and pigs at one point. I had a pet raccoon at one point. We just had a sort of idyllic. I really did consider it sort of an idyllic childhood with my 8 siblings. And so that's sort of where I grew up, like in this massive family in very much blue collar Buffalo, New York. And we were in a town, Hamburg, which is sort of one of the blue collar towns. We had a lovely I'm in a nice sprawling farm there, but it wasn't the ritzy. It wasn't the north side of Buffalo is the ritzier side of Buffalo. So, and I went to public school and had a great time growing up. I did have leukemia when I was a kid, which was the part that was, but it was a weird story because back then you didn't necessarily tell the kids my parents didn't tell me for ages that I had leukemia. I thought I had mononucleosis. But if you look at the age of the first leukemia wave of leukemia survivors, like ALL is one of the medical miracles in this country, that in the world, that once upon a time, if you had childhood leukemia, you were dead. And because of the work of certainly here at St. Jude, but other places across the country, came up with this new way of treating it. And my dad, because he was in academic medicine, he knew someone in New York named Jim Holland, who was a very famous cancer researcher. And so they put me on this new regimen. And because of that, I'm still here. But my mom, I once put her on my radio show after when she was much older, and we were looking back at this period. And she said when I was first diagnosed that she thought it would have been better off if I'd been hit by a truck, because it was going to end the same way. And so that was bracing. I can't imagine what it was like for her to go through that. But it's one of the reasons I have great faith, and I sort of think it's sort of symmetrical that I ended up in this city where St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is such an important part of it.
Absolutely. It's the gem to the world right here in our backyard. Yeah. So how old were you when your mom finally told you?
I was in third grade. No, when they told me, it was several years before they told me.
Oh, really?
I just thought I was sick. I didn't really know. I thought I had a really bad case of mononucleosis. You're a kid, you just, And so, but at the time I had shingles down my side, and I had a fever, and I do remember like yesterday, going into the hospital and the doctor saying that I'd have to stay there for some time when I went into Buffalo Children's Hospital. So I remember that part like it was yesterday. But because I wasn't aware that I even had cancer, I know that I'm a cancer survivor and that it's a miracle. I don't feel like I went through I don't feel necessarily all the time like a cancer survivor, although I know I'm really lucky to be here and have had the life that I've had.
And not to second guess your mom's decision not to tell you, probably turned out pretty good.
Oh, now everyone would say that's just not the way to do it. Like, among other things, and the truth of the matter is, like, I think a lot of us have had mental health issues through the years over whatever. And I've had therapists who love to focus on this story because your parents are basically lying to you. Like I'm grateful for them, but and then my siblings didn't know. Oh. And so had I died, it would have turned out evidently would have been really hard on the siblings because they were hiding it from right now. It's crazy. You look back at what they did, it would not have, no one would do that. Like it's just not done, that they would have, but this was the 1960s, things were different then. It wasn't as open or whatever. Like we were from a family, like I love my family, but we were not great at discussing weakness or vulnerability or any of those things. I remember when my mom at one point had a hysterectomy and just a real basic, whatever history. And we didn't go visit her in the hospital. We didn't it was like weakness, illness, those things. What you do is you're supposed to be cheerful in life and surge ahead,
rub some dirt on it.
And that I don't think is the most, in terms of your mental health, necessarily the best way to go about things. I think we've learned some things about that, but it worked out beautifully for me. Like I was aware I was treated differently than the other 8 kids, both good. I got more ice cream, and bad. Like I didn't get to go to camp and stuff like that. Why am I the only one who doesn't get to go to camp? But yeah, I had a wonderful childhood.
That's awesome. So Buffalo, I was going to ask you a little bit about Buffalo. I spent some time not living there, but when I was in the automotive business, one of my jobs was in the Northeast. I had 3 states, a dozen dealers.
Mm-hmm.
So as a factory rep, I would travel to these towns and meet with the dealership and do my job. And one of the funniest was, now I moved from Southern California to New Jersey.
Right.
And people thought I was nuts.
Right. Yeah,
right.
Sure,
well, and I just wondered, like, who did I piss off at the company? What did I do wrong? And then they said, all right, not only are you going to live in New Jersey, but you're going to get to travel to Syracuse and Rochester and Buffalo and up here in Vermont.
Right. All these godforsaken snowy places.
Places. And it was October, and I show up at the dealership in Buffalo. And at the time, it was only 40 degrees.
Right.
But you would have thought I was, in a blizzard the way I was. And they just start falling out of their chairs, cracking up.
Right. Laughing at you.
So, but, that's where I learned what the term ballet was, across in Toronto.
The Canadian ballet.
The Canadian ballet.
The Canadian ballet is strip joints that they had in Niagara Falls.
Not that I ever went, for the record.
It's also true in Detroit, in Windsor. They have the Canadian ballet over there. Yeah, same thing.
So, obviously cold and all that.
Yeah, Buffalo. It's funny. It's one of the things I do think that you see it. Now it's weird. Like the Bills Mafia didn't exist when I was a kid. There was no such thing as the Bills Mafia. But there was always and has always been a very defensive spirit that Buffalonians have about Buffalo.
Right.
And a bunch have left because, like, when I was growing up, it was steel mills, and the steel mills closed down. And a lot of those people ultimately lived to North Carolina or Tennessee or whatever. Like, there's clearly been some Buffalo has shrunk over the years. But I think for most of the people that I knew, that if there were jobs and stuff, they would have stayed. Like Buffalonians, I think, tend to love Buffalo. The winters can be hard, but there is a spirit about the place. And it's honestly one of the things, I do think Buffalo and Memphis are similar in that they're both these underdog cities. The difference that I noticed when I first got here, and sadly it's returned, is that the harshest critics on Memphis are Memphians. Yep. And that's really not true in Buffalo. In Buffalo, people, and for a while in Memphis, there was about a good 15-year period or 10 or 15-year period where everything was 901 this and 901 that and everything, and grit and grind. And there was this surge of community pride. And that reminded me of what it felt like to be living in Buffalo.
Right.
And then lately, because of lots of circumstances, that has changed. And so, that's one of the ways that they're different. But I do think that growing up in Buffalo prepared me well for living in Memphis, because they're both, I think Johnny Carson said Buffalo's not the end of the world, but you could see it from there. They'd call it the armpit of the East or wherever. Like it was not a glamorous place to grow up. And Memphis is not a glamorous place to grow up or to live. And so, but they both suit me just fine. Like when I come back to Memphis from New York or Boston or somewhere else, I'm always relieved to be back. I've become a bit of a country mouse, and this has really become home for me. And now this is where I've lived longer than anywhere else. Right.
You said something too that resonates with me very much. Lived in Tennessee twice. Obviously, Memphis was the second time, and I've said the very same thing. There's a lot of cities in this country that struggle with certain aspects. Certainly, Memphis is one of them. But Memphis, the folks that have lived here, that were born here, you hear second, third generation a lot. They're the hardest ones on it. Memphians are the hardest ones.
No, I get discouraged by. So when Kash Patel recently said that Memphis is the murder capital of the world, which may or may not be true. Like the fact is that like this year, Memphis is 8 or something in terms of by population, I think, last numbers I checked. But whatever Kash Patel said it, head of the FBI. And, but what discourages me is how it feels like there's a good chunk of Memphians who can't wait to go to their own social media account and amplify that and say, see what a hellhole it is. And I just don't understand how that is productive, or like we all acknowledge the problems. And one of the things that I really do wonder about New Orleans has the same basic murder rate, whatever, or depending. We are in a cluster of cities with New Orleans and St. Louis and Baltimore and Memphis, where crime should be better. Like you wish it were better. It's a real problem. But I don't know that it defines those cities either internally or externally in the way that it seems to have defined Memphis. Stephen A. Smith didn't just go on talking about the murder rate's just as bad in New Orleans. He didn't talk about the Pelicans that way. You don't talk about the Cardinals that way in St. Louis. You don't necessarily. And so that's the part of it that it's not an excuse to say this is other cities have problems and so therefore we should ignore our problems. That's not true at all. I just don't understand why it feels like in Memphis it is the only narrative about the city, whereas in New Orleans you talk about all the other stuff. Right. You say New Orleans, you think Mardi Gras, and you think like lots of fun stuff, good food and good drink. And so that's the part of that bothers me about it in particular. But
so maybe it's when you are, when you really, 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 really love something and you really have high standards for something and you really value the historical aspect of something, the cultural aspect of something, to see it struggling, you're hard on it. I don't know what it is, but I often feel like sometimes it's going to take somebody from outside of Memphis. I don't know if it's somebody, but it's going to take an effort from outside of Memphis to fix Memphis. And I don't know. I'm like you. I love it here. I'm a music guy. So, and where I live basically on the bluffs overlooking the Blues Highway 61 and the history of all that and the music and, like you said, country and all that stuff. So, it's, but I've lived in Houston. Most of my life was Los Angeles. I've seen parts of New Jersey that, you would never want to be in. So, well,
I don't you think there's a skill to being happy where you are?
100%.
And so
it's a choice.
Yeah. I have places that I prefer. Like of the places that I've lived more than a year in Buffalo, Boston, Washington, D.C., New York, Melbourne, Australia, Anniston, Alabama, Miami, and Memphis. I think those are the places. And probably my least favorite of them was Miami. I'm not a Miami kind of guy. But I was perfectly happy in Miami. I wasn't loathing Miami every step of that month. I guess Anniston wouldn't have been small town Alabama wouldn't have been sustainable for more than the 2 years I was there. But I was happy in all of them. I was happy in Anniston, Alabama, and I was happy. Well, whatever. The town, to the extent that I wasn't happy, the towns weren't responsible. It was my own issues when I was living in Manhattan or living in Anniston.
Right. Always thought Manhattan would be a good place to live for a couple of years. Love that.
Yeah, city. I went to school there for a year, journalism school there for a year in Manhattan, and I found I really did just live in my little neighborhood around Columbia. I lament the way one does. You lament that I didn't play piano growing up, and I lament that I didn't. I lament that I didn't when I was in New York take more advantage of New York.
So let's go back to high school in Buffalo.
Yeah. Public high school in Buffalo. I played tennis, but nice. I was on the tennis team, but I was no great athlete. All my siblings got A's, and I knew that I was supposed to get A's. That's what I knew. Like we were all like there are 5 brothers. Steve went to Yale and Harvard Law School. Ben went to Harvard and Michigan Law School. Hugh went to Williams and Harvard Medical School. I went to Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and Tim went to Yale and Harvard Business School. Wow. So it was, again, I also think had I grown up in a family of drug dealers, it's very clearly I would have, we did the family thing. And the family thing was to get A's. I studied hard and I worked hard, and they valued education. And, so that became the thing. And so mostly I was a smart kid who played the tuba and tennis and showed sheep. I had
what?
We had sheep. And so we raised and showed in 4-H at the county fair.
Nice.
We showed sheep. I mean, this is a journal I've just pulled out of my thing that my teachers made me keep in 7th grade. You had to write something in your journal every day. So that's wool. That's wool from they were shearing the sheep that day. So I wrote about that. There's some feathers from the chickens. These are from 1973, by the way. 70s. From the most gruesome one is, so we also raised standard poodles. My mom raised standard poodles. And when standard poodles are little, you chop off the end of their tail. It's called dock their tail. Poodles actually should have pretty long tails, but if you see a poodle, they don't, because they dock the tail. I don't know why. That's just what happens. So it must have been that on the last day that I did this journal, we must have been the day that my mom docked the poodle's tails. Uh-oh. Because here in an envelope, in a cellophane envelope, it's from is the end of a tail. But the best thing is, this was the last entry of the entire journal, and the caption on the tail it says, "This is the tail's end." See, that's the kind of quality writing that I was doing even in 7th grade. Yeah, I had an interesting.
So was it? That's an intimidating environment to grow into. This is just projecting here, but was it a table conversation every night at dinner where your parents were constantly making sure that you're getting A's and all that? Because there's genetics at play.
You didn't know.
You didn't know.
No one knew. Like, I mean, they would look at my report card. I remember one day I got a B in shop. One year I got a B in shop, and the report cards used to come. They were sort of computer printouts, and then they had ink on the other side. You'd tear them open. And so I knew that I'd gotten this B in shop, and I thought, oh my God, this is a disaster. So I went out before the report card came, and I rubbed it hard together so it blotted. I knew it would blot out what you would see the grades. And so when mom opened the report card, I was like, oh, I can tell you what the grades were, and I rattled off A's, right? And she wasn't fooled. She said, no, I'll call on the principal and see what you got. So they checked, but it is weird now. You log on and you can see your kids' grades and it's pathetic. I mean, it's like my parents, day to day, they didn't have a slightest view. What happens though with a family that big is that it becomes the culture. Like you just know you're supposed to do well, and it becomes self-reinforcing. And yes, there was a certain pressure to live up to it. I remember like, this is so ridiculous, but I remember you got into National Honor Society, and 9 or 10 kids got in junior year, and then senior year, 20 more kids got in. But the smartest 9 kids got in junior. And I was keenly aware that all 7 of my older siblings had gotten in as juniors. I was obsessed by that for a long time. Like, I can't be the first Calkins who doesn't get in. So like that part was internal pressure. And it wasn't always good. Like, I cared more about A's than I did about learning. Right. And that's not good. And that carried over at Harvard sometimes, even I remember at Harvard Law School, I would not do some things, take classes that were interesting, some certain classes that were interesting to me, because I didn't think I would get an A in them. And so I would avoid hard things because I was so scared of failure. And that is not productive. What the worst thing I did in that vein was, there's a famous constitutional law professor named Larry Tribe. And you can even see him now. He's on Twitter, and he's one of the leading constitutional law scholars in the country. And he asked me, I took his class and I got an A in it. And he asked me to be a research assistant for him. And I turned it down. I came up with a reason why I couldn't do it. Really, the real reason was I was afraid I was going to be bad at it, and I would be exposed for being, not as smart as he thought I was, whatever, like that. So I do think that in some ways it was great that my parents that they created this culture of succeeding and whatever else. My brother is head of the, if you need to get a heart ablation or a pacemaker and you want to go to Johns Hopkins, my brother is head of that. Whatever. My sister, Lucy Calkins, she's actually somewhat infamous now because she's involved in a controversy about how people teach kids to read in this country. But educators know my sister Lucy, but the downside is I really did. The culture was so I have to succeed that it didn't encourage learning for learning's sake, or it wasn't their fault. It just was the way it manifested on me, the 8th of 9. It didn't, and it encouraged me to do things that I knew that I could do well, as opposed to challenging myself by doing things that I don't know if I can do well, but might be good and interesting and whatever else. So all parts of it aren't 100% great.
Right. Did you like Harvard? Was it fun?
I loved Harvard College. Fun. I mean, it's just so different. When I see, we would never drink on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night. Like, it never occurred to anyone to drink on to
do that.
What? It just wouldn't. Yeah. But it wasn't all busting your ass all the time. But people were serious students, and so you'd go out Friday or Saturday night and whatever. But it was not people had fun and drank but no, it wasn't. It was like, in that sense, it was very different. So it was serious. The other thing that was interesting is that, like, I lived in a suite of 8 kids freshman year. And I think people have this image of Harvard as filled with rich people. Mm-hmm. Here's what I lived with. I lived with Gus Udo, who was a Nigerian long jumper. I lived with Bharat Dubey, who was a kid from India who had gotten a scholarship. I lived with Geoff Jack, who was from Kansas. He applied to 2 colleges, Labette County Junior College and Harvard, because his counselor said, hey, maybe you could get into Harvard. So he applied to Labette County Junior College, because that's what everybody in Kansas did, and Harvard. Ethan Berkowitz came from some money in San Francisco, so he was a reason. His family was really well off. Bob Higgins, his dad owned a bar in Long Island. Peter Koharis was a poor public school kid from Greek public school kid from Boston. Bruce Williams was a public school kid from New Hampshire. I'm sure there were rich people, but the other thing is, I think this is true. It's back then you didn't know. Like, we all ate at the cafeteria. No one was getting Uber Eats or driving limousines or doing social media, posting their trips to wherever. I guess if someone went off to a trip to Europe during spring break, I didn't know about it or whatever, but everyone wasn't posting everything about their gorgeous, beautiful mansion life. We all literally ate in the same one cafeteria all the time. And so, sure, once or twice, you might go get a pizza or something once a week, but you wouldn't now, truly, and I sound like get off my lawn guy, but there are people in Memphis private middle schools that will order Uber Eats to deliver it to their middle school because they don't like what's on the, cafeteria and whatever, what's in this. So it was just a different time. There were clearly people with money, but it wasn't as ostentatious as it was. Right. And I'm sure that's true at Ole Miss, and just like it was at Harvard. It just feels like it's not just that the rich are richer and the poor are poorer, which is true in America. It's also that we're more keenly, it's all very visible now.
Yeah, it's so transparent.
Yeah.
The fact that you remember your 8 roommates just now from...
they're my good friends of mine.
That speaks volumes as to sort of the fraternity of... or alumni network that you have through. Yeah. I can remember college. I can remember some of my teammates, and I can
teammates in what sport?
I was a place kicker and a soccer player.
At where?
Cal State Fullerton, California State Fullerton, which just had a big transfer, actually. Baseball player. 2 brothers just went to Vanderbilt. I guess it was a big deal. Anyways, it was baseball school. I don't know what I was doing there. But I remember some of that, and unfortunately, and I do remember some of my fraternity brothers, but it's probably not things that we can talk about why I remember them.
Back then at Harvard, Facebook was, it wasn't a company yet. It was what you called the book.
That's right. Yeah.
The book with all the freshman pictures in it. And so Facebook was a thing. That's where the name Facebook came from, is because at Harvard, they called that book that you'd get when you come in as a freshman with all the other freshman kids in there. That was called the Facebook. And so that's where Facebook came from.
Yeah. You've seen the movie.
I've seen the movie. Yeah. But even that movie, I didn't recognize from my experience at Harvard. Like, that was people hanging out at these finals clubs and doing cocaine and stuff like that. The finals clubs maybe, I don't know what percent, like back 5% of the kids belong to finals clubs. Most kids don't belong to finals clubs. And so what would happen? You'd get invited to come and have drinks at the finals club to see if you could be admitted to the finals club, like if you were part of the social elite. And of the 8 roommates, the only person who was invited to even go have a drink at the finals club to see if there was me, because my uncle was on the board of Harvard, honestly. And so the name Calkins back then meant something at Harvard. And so, but I didn't go because I didn't want to go to a club that wasn't inviting my friends, so it would never occurred to me to have gone. And I was a country mouse. I wasn't really, I had the last name, I guess, but I never fancied myself like the
social elite or
Winklevoss twins or whatever they were, the Winklevoss twins. So there were those people, but I don't recognize that movie as my experience at all.
Right. When did you decide? Well, you had your undergrad there. When did you decide law? So, like, how did that? Was that again in line with the culture of the family?
Well, what was it? I was good at following a path, and if medical school is a path and law school is a path,
right?
Following a path, going to school, getting A's, that was my specialty. And so, some of my siblings are doctors, but I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor because I wasn't going to take organic chemistry, and I faint at the sight of blood, and so whatever else. So I was not going to do that. And I always like history and politics and whatever. And they would say you could do anything with a law degree. I mean, I was a history major. I loved history. I love history. I love politics. Right. I love all that stuff. But the truth of the matter is, and I don't think people anymore go to law school just to go to law school to get a law degree as much as they once did. You should go to law school if you want to be a lawyer. Period. You should go to law school if you want to be a lawyer, because most people who go to law school turn out to be lawyers. That's what they do. And it is a totally unnecessary as a general education, teaching you to think, whatever else. That's nonsense. So, and it's 3 years and a lot of money and a lot of work. And I don't think it's a very productive use of your time if you don't want to be a lawyer. If you want to be a lawyer, go to law school by all means. But try to make sure you know what lawyers do before you do that. And I remember going to my first legal method. So I applied to law school to see if I'd get in, whatever. I got into Harvard Law School. How do you turn Harvard Law School down? Whatever. But then I remember in my first legal methods class, walking back thinking, this is not for me. Because it is a very, debating legal issues is fun, but the actual practice of law is a very detail-oriented, grinding, sort of deep research, finding 4 citations or 12 citations to prove a point that you want to make. It is and so it just was very clear that, but I didn't know what to do. And I chased prestige. So then I applied, I got a clerkship on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which is a prestigious clerkship. And so I said, I'll do that. Maybe I'll like that. And then I'm like, well, go to a big firm. They're paying a bonus, to go to a big firm. Maybe you'll like doing that. And at the time, and I was kind of then basically falling apart too. I was at that point deeply unhappy, like the proverbial frog in a boiling water, lobby of boiling water. I didn't really know that, but I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I started to become drinking too much. I became a deep hypochondriac. I was just really depressed. And
was it because of that?
It was all connected. Yeah, I think it was because I wasn't finding my way in the world. It wasn't meaningful work. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I think your 20s, my 3 kids, you said your 2 twins are 30. My 3 boys are all in their 20s. I think your 20s are hard. Some people love their 20s, but I think your 20s are hard because you're supposed to find what you want to do for your life, find your life partner, and the thing that you do for your life, it's supposed to make you money and have meaning and contribute to the world. And all these things are hard. And so all of a sudden you look up and like, this isn't working out. My career's not what I want it to be, or I haven't found my partner or what. I think your 20s are really hard. And because that's when it feels like it's for real, and they were for me. And I think my boys, I noticed that, like on any given day are either high or low or struggling or trying to find their way. I think it's just natural. And I didn't do it well at all. I really struggled in my 20s. And I remember there was one time when people in the narrative, lots of people asked me before about how you go from being a lawyer to whatever. Isn't it nice you followed your dream to become a sports writer, right? And that's that's the cleaned up story, is that I always knew I wanted to be a sports writer. And I did at 12. I would have told you I wanted to be a sports writer. And then I wanted to be a lawyer, and I went and followed my dream. And that's kind of true, except for like at one point when I was in Washington, I couldn't stand up in the shower because I was so dizzy and I thought I had a brain tumor. I didn't have a brain tumor. I don't know when people say they had a breakdown, I don't know what a breakdown looks like exactly. But I was such a profound hypochondriac that I was conjuring up brain tumors, and then I wouldn't fly back then because I was crazy. I would only take a train. So I took a train home to Buffalo, and my dad arranged me for me to get an MRI. And I got an MRI, and of course I was fine. And so then I took the train back to Washington, and I met with a guy, and they just started out on this Prozac stuff. And so I started on Prozac then. And I was clearly, I knew I couldn't continue life as it was. I was sort of faking it as a lawyer. And I was a very good law student. I wasn't a very good lawyer. And so then I finally said, well, let's just give this journalism thing a try. Maybe I'll like it. I liked it when I was in college.
So it resurfaced.
And so I said, let's go do that. But even so, the first job I got was in Anniston, Alabama. And I liked it in Anniston, Alabama. I was having a good time, but I was making $225 a week. And I wasn't sure it would work. Like for about 3 years as a sports writer, really, until I got to Memphis, I wasn't sure. Like I could have gone back to being a lawyer because my credentials were good enough that I still could have gone back to being a lawyer. But it wasn't this, oh, he just woke up one day and decided to follow his dream and it worked out beautifully and whatever else. A lot of luck went into it. Like I got this job because Al Dunning, who was my predecessor, died, like if he hadn't died, like I could have, lots of things. Lots of times they ask people about their career, people who seem to be successful. And they're asking in retrospect, it worked out because that's why you're asking. Here we are, right? And you do wonder, there are 17 different turns I could have taken along the way where you wouldn't be interested in talking to me and I might still be, whatever else. So it's not, all you can do is do your best on any given day and try to be cheerful and optimistic and do your best and then, and do the next thing. But it never is as clean as the narrative might look.
You said a lot of things I resonate with because I got married, bought a condominium, and got my first real job within 4 months of each other.
Wow.
Graduated college, got married, bought a condo, got a job. And, when I look I just, for instance.
And you're still married?
Still married.
To this same person. See, that's, you did it better than I did.
35 years.
That's great.
I just did that.
Yeah.
But I had no idea.
Right.
Like I knew I wanted to be an architect when I was, like you said, when you were younger.
Right. You
said, if you'd asked me, I want to be a sports writer. I was really good at, you give me a ruler and a pencil. I was great at that. But then sports took me this way.
Right.
And matter of fact, participating in the Memphis Chamber mentoring program, and I had a mentee that I just met, and she has it all mapped out at a young age.
Right.
And I don't know how she goes, well, and I go, I had no idea.
Right.
I literally knew that I've got a mortgage payment now, and
that's amazing.
I'm probably going to have kids, and I got to get a job.
Right.
Will anybody hire me?
Right.
So I don't know. That's a lot of pressure.
I do wonder though if that's because I do wonder, had I been married, had to get a job, like in some ways the pressure of having to get a job makes you buckle down. You're not thinking about, how am I happy? Am I happy today? Am I not happy today? You're like, I got to get a job. And so you get a job and that's the next thing. And so maybe in some ways it's clarifying for you or simplifying for you.
Yeah.
You're married, so you need to get a job. It's time.
Right.
Onward we go.
My first boss when I got in the auto industry, my first boss at Nissan, he pulled out of his pocket the list of jobs he's either accomplished already at Nissan or was going to accomplish at Nissan. I'm like, so this is what I mark. He goes, this is my plan. And this is what I'm marching to every day, and nothing got in his way. It's amazing.
Well, I guess there's certainly different ways to do this, right?
Right. Yeah. There's different ways to do it. So that's interesting. So let's get back into journalism. How did you come here?
Oh, so I was getting to a late start in journalism because I had gone off to be a lawyer and stuff. So I was,
by the time still in your 20s or no?
By the time I started at Anniston, I was 31 and I was there for 2 years. And then I got a job covering the Marlins in Fort Lauderdale for the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel. And I did that for basically a year and a half. And then I was a feature writer down there. But I was kind of in a hurry to be the columnist. That's what I wanted. As the beat writer, you're writing day in, day out, groin pulls, whatever. You're writing game stories and whatever. But as the columnist, you get to write about all kinds of things, right? And you get to write with your voice and whatever. And so the columnist here, Al Dunning, who was very well regarded, he literally died because he had covered Mississippi State game the night before. I think it was Mississippi State Memphis game the night before. He came home. He had a heart attack. He died. And so they were looking for a columnist, and they heard about me. And I do think that's one place where having the Harvard stuff in my resume helped, just because it catches people's eye. And so that was, but I was kind of, at that point, I'd only been a sports writer for 4 years. So to become the sports columnist, it was what was then a major metropolitan daily, which had 250,000 circulation, was, a very good job. And so I moved here, and I don't know that I didn't know what I expected. I wasn't hell-bent on leaving in 2 years, but I was open to, let's see where this goes. And then back then, it was really the perfect job because you're covering everything. Newspapers then were so rich because everyone who wanted to sell a house, sell a car, advertise a job, whatever it is, the only way to reach people, everybody, was through the newspaper. The internet hadn't been invented yet. And so they were printing money. I remember my first house I bought in Memphis. I was thrilled because I could get the real estate section early at the Commercial Appeal. I could get it on Friday or Saturday, and I'd get a jump on people looking at houses because they didn't get it till the paper came out on Sunday, right? Now, there was none of this online stuff. And so we were rich. And so I covered 8 Olympics, and I covered the Super Bowl, and the stuff I covered was ridiculous. I covered Winter Olympics for the Memphis Commercial Appeal. I covered, certainly every Masters golf tournament. I covered the U.S. Open. I covered World Series that, St. Louis and Boston, whatever. You'd cover, and the nice thing was, and then the Memphis Tigers were going strong, and the Memphis Grizzlies were just arriving at this point, sort of not long after I got here. So the Tyson fight was happening here. But the other great secret was college football was big on Saturday. But because we didn't have pro football, you actually had Sunday off. And most of my friends in other major league cities, like my friend Dave Hyde at the Sun-Sentinel, he would go cover a Florida or a Miami or a Florida State game on Saturday, and then he'd have to cover a Dolphins game on Sunday every single weekend of the fall. And in Memphis, we didn't do the Titans. Whatever. The Titans were here for a year. I covered those, whatever. So I came here, and I immediately, I just started, as soon as I got here and started doing this job, I knew I wasn't going to be a lawyer anymore. And so it was, and it took a little while to be accepted here. You look at, and even now people say you're not from here occasionally, even though I've been here for 3 decades. But in the end, I've been incredibly welcomed here. It has really been the best period of my life. It's where I got to be, what I wanted to be, where my kids were born and raised. So Memphis has been spectacular for me, but that's how I ended up here. It's just they happened to have a column job, and I got it.
So you got a phone call.
Yeah, I got a phone call. I probably got a phone call. I probably got a phone call. And there was a couple times.
It wasn't a text. It wasn't an email.
It wasn't a text. There were a couple times I was probably close to leaving. The closest was I was offered the exact same job in Seattle in the early 2000s at one point. And Seattle's it had all 4 sports teams, and it's a bigger city. And I like the mountains and the ocean and stuff like that. But it was just trying to, and this is sort of I'm happy here. Do you go somewhere else to try to recreate happiness when I know I'm happy here? And it wouldn't have been so dramatically different. It doesn't immediately launch you onto ESPN as a whatever. It wouldn't really change my name. You'd just be a local columnist in Seattle as opposed to a local columnist in Memphis. Right. And I liked Memphis. And by the way, my family's mostly out east, and I could still drive there in a day, put my dogs and kids in the car and drive there in a day. Whereas if you're Seattle, everything's a flight. Yeah. You know that as someone who's lived everywhere. But so that was probably the closest I came to leaving. But basically, I've been here and happy ever since.
What was Memphis like when you first got here? What was it like back? What year was this we're talking now?
It was 96. Well, I mean, the two big differences were, well, back then it was right. It felt like the vibe was in some ways similar to the vibe is now, in that Memphis was feeling pretty bad about itself. And largely it was sort of crystallized around the NFL. They'd been trying to get the NFL, trying to get the NFL, trying to get the NFL, trying to get the NFL. And rejected. And it felt like that was sort of consistent. I remember the first weekend I moved here, my parents came with me and we were at a concert, and at intermission, people asked me, they were making conversations like the people next to us. I said, why did you move here? But it didn't sound like, why did you move here? It sounded like, why the hell did you move here? Right. So in that way, it was similar. There were things, obviously, the Grizzlies weren't here yet. And the Green Line wasn't here yet. Like, that's spectacular. Shelby Farms wasn't what it is now. Like, there's a lot of things are dramatically better. I'll say this though: crime has always been a problem in Memphis. It's a Mississippi River town, right? It's always been a problem in Memphis. The gun stuff just wasn't like it was not like that when I came here in '96. It just wasn't. You know, and you didn't just feel like all the time that, you know, someone's going to bust into your car, or that, and it wasn't this constant drumbeat of crime that you hear now.
Gun violence, yeah.
And gun violence. And obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, the biggest reason is there's just a lot more guns. Honestly, that is the biggest. Poverty has been here all along, right? And so the biggest reason is there's a lot more guns, and there's complicated reasons for that. But that's why, you know, and so in that way, that's been discouraging, because it felt like we went from Memphis beating itself up when I first got here. And partly I didn't write a book. I just put my columns and stapled them together and call it a book. But what those columns crystallized was the way that Memphis and sports helped change Memphians' view of themselves. Like, the grit grind stuff didn't exist when I first got here. That was all the Grizzlies, right? And those Grizzlies, that Grizzlies team, the core four, they took all the things that were sort of not bad about Memphis, but the fact that it's an underdog place and it's a little rough around the edges, and the grit grind turned that into a point of pride, a slogan, this is what we are, and we embrace it. And so between the Tigers going to the Final Four under John Calipari and 3 straight Elite Eights, and between the Redbirds moving and being successful downtown, and the Tyson Lewis fight, and then the Grizzlies, it really crystallized this momentum that the town felt like it had.
Right.
And so what's been discouraging recently, it feels like, really since the pandemic, it feels like all that momentum has been lost. Now, some people would say the momentum was illusory, that it was never real and didn't translate into real economic growth and real development in the way it should, that it was really just sloganeering and feeling. And I don't know enough about the reality of that to comment on it. But to the extent that Memphis, you know, that I'm discouraged about anything, it's that it feels like we've regressed off of some real momentum that had been building.
Real or not, just
and
feeling good energy.
Yeah, and other people tell me it was real, or these things intersect. Like the real good feeling about a place helps produce real development and whatever. But so I can't. I don't know enough about the actual numbers to weigh in on that.
It to me, again, I just lean on the different cities I've lived in and experiences. But I've never quite been anywhere where it's, whether you're in a company meeting, a social gathering, it just seems to be somehow it finds its way into every conversation.
Every conversation. Yeah.
And it's just.
And that's what I mean when I said before, like, does it find itself in every conversation into New Orleans? The numbers are the same. Does it find itself in every conversation in St. Louis? The numbers are the same. So why does it find itself in every conversation here? I just find it absolutely mystifying. And again, I'm not urging people to put their head in the sand about the real problems, of course. But the reality is a problem, but the perception is also a problem.
Right.
And those are related, but they're not. Those are also separate.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about some Grizzlies, man.
Yeah.
Would you say, are you balanced with Tigers, Grizzlies? You've got those two sports. I don't know if you got a history with both of them.
Oh, I've covered them both over the years. I mean,
what do you enjoy the most?
I mean, what I enjoy the most is really what I enjoy the most is a good story.
Good story.
Like it doesn't matter to me. People will. What I enjoy. I grew up in Buffalo. I like the NFL and the NHL. That's what I like the most.
Yeah.
Like so, I still watch the NHL. Like so the NHL draft's coming up this weekend, and I'm probably the only one in Memphis who cares deeply about the NHL draft. So, whoever you were, I think. Who were you a fan of when you were 12? What were the teams that were your 12?
Well, I didn't have a choice. So my father's family's from San Antonio, so it was Cowboys.
So, and you were still a Cowboys fan? No?
I have vowed to never root for them again.
Really?
It just, we're going to go down
because a rabbit of Jerry Jones.
But Jerry Jones. And it started with Romo. I actually met Jerry Jones in the stadium, in the new stadium. And I said, politely, I really wish you would trade Romo. And his face turned completely red. The person next to me thought he was going to punch me. He turned around and walked away. But, it's just this perpetual, whatever it is, of just being average. Now, look, if he was sitting right here, he'd probably point to his checkbook and the valuation that's on the Cowboys and say, I think I've done a pretty good job. But they just tore my heart.
Right. Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Being a fan is really tricky. So, but the answer is like, what do I like most? Like the story that I wrote about Ali Liddell and the Jazz and the Central High Jazz kids.
Yeah.
Like as I enjoy that story as much as anything I've ever written. Yeah. So I just like good stories, and they can pop up anywhere. I like hockey and the NFL the best of all in terms of a fan. In terms of the local teams, I mean, there's no question. When I first got here, the Tigers were it. Yeah. Jerry West used to complain. He'd be here. We the NBA here, and we're the second fiddle to the Tigers. How's that even possible? Like he would totally irritated by that. And so now I think there's no question that the way that the world of college sports has changed, it's really harder and harder for the University of Memphis to compete at that level. And so in the meantime, the Grizzlies are, it's the big leagues. And so I think there are people for whom, if the Tigers could ever win a national championship in basketball, there are certainly a lot of people in Memphis for whom that would be much more meaningful than the Grizzlies. But I'm totally convinced that there are more people who follow the Grizzlies, care about the Grizzlies. And now, if you grow up as a kid in Memphis, instead of being a fan of the Tigers and Penny Hardaway and Elliot Perry, and you grow up and you're a fan of Ja and Jaren and Dez and whatever. So that would, the Grizzlies are the king now. Now it so happens that now that I don't write sports full time, we have on the Daily Memphian two terrific Grizzly writers, and Chris Harrington and Drew Hill.
Yeah.
And we've got very good Tiger writers too, but it feels like there's a greater need for me to sort of weigh in with the occasional column. So I probably write more columns on the Tigers than I do on the Grizzlies when it comes to what I still do with sports, but I still write some Grizzly columns too. Right. So I don't, some years they're both good. Some years, there have been years when they're not both good. There's been years when one good, and there used to be a theory that you can't have them both be good at the same time, but I don't think that's true. It is true. I think this is true. It would have been better to have an NFL team, not just because the NFL is king, but you already have kind of a semi-professional college basketball team. And so there's an overlap there. It's a lot of nights to go to FedEx Forum for basketball. If you have season tickets to the Grizzlies and the Tigers, and so a lot of people choose. And I do think it has hurt the Tigers to have the Grizzlies in town. It just has. Whereas I don't think it would have been as much with the NFL. I think it would it would have been a cleaner fit with an NFL team.
Is it the deal with the NFL? Is it just numbers, population?
No, I mean, back when it happened, it wasn't even that, because once upon a time Memphis was bigger. Not so long ago, Memphis was bigger than Nashville. Way back when, what I believe this to be true, if Memphis had agreed to build a stadium, they would have gotten a team, and either Charlotte or particularly Jacksonville would not have gotten a team, particularly Jacksonville. Yeah. But Memphis was always and maybe there's a lesson here, whatever. Memphis was always like, we'll just fix this stadium up and it'll be good enough. And the NFL is like, no, we'll go to the place that's going to basically rip its stadium down or completely redo its stadium. And so I think a lot of in the end, most people who followed this closely, who were here at the time, will tell you that they really thought Memphis was going to get a team, and that the big problem in the end was they never did what they had to do to build a stadium. Because in the end, like the NFL, I mean, it's crazy in some ways that an NBA team would leave Vancouver, which is a more glamorous, richer city, to come to Memphis. Why did they do that? Because the stadium. There, they didn't know. Well, two reasons. One, the dollar, the Canadian, was a real problem. But then the other was the Vancouver Canucks owned and ran to that stadium. And so there was no way the Grizzlies could make money in that stadium. And so a lot of pro sports really boils down to the stadiums. Yeah. And so Memphis was willing to build a stadium there. At first, even there, people thought, we'll just fix up the pyramid. That'll be good enough. The NBA made it very clear, no, fixing up the pyramid is not good enough.
And now, so where are we with the FedEx Forum right now in the Grizzlies? Did they get the budget?
No,
passed?
Now it's a problem. It's a real challenge. And it is probably certainly my biggest sports concern. So the lease, when the Grizzlies moved here, there was this whole contingent of, don't bring them here because they'll just leave. And it was fear-mongering. It was stupid. They were never going to come and leave in 5 years. But Memphis was so instinctively insecure that they thought anything good that happened, they're just going to leave. 3 years, 5 years. And I spent most of my career writing, no, they're not leaving. Stop. It's, and so, but now the lease is up. Lease up's 29. And they've gotten enough money to redo the stadium. Although, let's be honest, Oklahoma City is building a whole new stadium. With Memphis, it's $550 million, I think is the last I heard, to refurbish FedEx Forum. So it's not like, the truth of the matter is, I know people want to hear it because it's public money to a billionaire, but it's much less public money than a lot of places are having to give their billionaire. But the problem is they haven't signed it. They have the money, but they haven't reached a lease agreement. And I believe one reason they haven't reached the lease agreement is there is real concern about the state of downtown, and both drawing people to the arena, having people be safe in and around the arena, the perception of the arena. Didn't help that Stephen A. Smith just did what he did. And then players also wanting players and everyone. So my understanding is that one of the reasons that it feels like no one's doing anything now is they're kind of waiting to see if there's some momentum for improving downtown. Because if there's not, I don't rule out the possibility that in 2029 they could up and leave. Or I don't think likely, but I think the other thing is they could sign a lease that has 1 million out clauses in it, right? And yeah, okay, we'll come, but in 5 years or 3 years or whatever else. I do think, and again, it's just tied to the future of the city. It's not like we should be worrying about the city anyway, right? So I'm not creating panic here, but I have never, ever, ever been worried about whether the team is staying or going until the last year.
Yeah.
And now I think it's a legitimate concern that they could go.
Yeah. Yeah. Perhaps it's the biggest reason, if we don't already have one, to focus on things that need to get focused on.
Yeah. And I do think it's part of the reason why. And people will argue about this, that should the focus be, why should the focus just be downtown? Like other people who are in other parts of the city where crime is worse or whatever, that's a real problem too. Everyone deserves to live in a safe neighborhood. But then other people will say, listen, if you can't keep your downtown safe and a place that people want to come to and whatever, what's the whole, right. It's over. Like, come on, you should be able to keep make your downtown a place that people can come to and enjoy and feel safe.
Well, restaurants too should be.
Downtown restaurants have really struggled downtown. Downtown restaurants have really struggled, and that's tragic too. So you want people to be able to go downtown and eat downtown. And now it feels more and more like, instead of going downtown and making a night of it and walking around and going to a Grizzlies game, now people will just go try to park in the garage and get out of there as fast as they can. And again, some of that's reality and some of it's perception,
right.
But those things are linked and you've got to change them both. What's
downtown look like without the Grizzlies?
Oh, there's a part of me that sometimes thinks, downtown UAB, like Memphis without the Grizzlies, right now it would be a massive blow. Huge blow because you would have had him and lost him. You would have had him and lost him. And not only that, you lost him because at least it would be, the city itself would be scapegoated. It would be say, we lost him. I'm sure because the city wasn't up to it. Right. And, whereas when a team leaves Los Angeles or something, they don't rip the city, but then sometimes you look around and you think, is Birmingham so bad? Right. Is Tulsa so bad? Is Louisville so bad? We have cities of the same ilk, same size that seem to go along just fine. I'm sure they have their problems in Birmingham or whatever else, but it probably isn't. I do think there are things more. I love sports, and I do believe in the value of a sports team to lift community spirits and do all that stuff, bind people together and whatnot, give you a spring in your step. Yeah. I really do believe in that. I think economists will tell you that a sports team doesn't generate any more than a basic grocery store. Like, it's not that it's wildly overrated, the economic impact. But I think the psychic impact is real. I really do. And so I've always valued having them here. But I can also see that, and leaving them, if they left, it would be devastating. But if they'd never been here, would the city have been with the trajectory of the city? I don't know. I don't know that. Like, maybe it would have been harder to recruit. Everyone has the same problem right now. FedEx has to recruit people to Memphis. St. Jude has to recruit people to Memphis. Downtown restaurant people have to get people to come down and eat in Memphis. The Grizzlies, we all have the same problem. And so everyone should be invested in the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's been a lot of reasons to the powers that be to focus on making sure that we keep the Grizzlies. A lot of great economic development has taken place over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the greater Memphis area. So if you look at Marshall County, DeSoto County,
interesting,
and Mississippi, there's just tremendous economic growth. And if you sit in the room with a lot of these companies that are moving here, whether you're there during the pitch or whether you're there just as part of, let's say, the Memphis Chamber.
Yeah. Grizzlies are part of it.
Yeah. That's part of it. And oddly enough, to people that are Memphians, the CEOs that are making these big decisions to move their companies here, they're not asking us about crime.
Right.
They're not spending 2 days in Memphis to talk about crime. Right. They want to know about the schools.
Right. They want to know about the workforce development.
The workforce development. They want to know that they have the resources to actually do what they need to do. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where there's a lot of cities have personalities that need fixing. We tend to dwell on it and define ourselves by it. Right. And it's just, it's unfortunate. So what excites you about the Grizzlies next year?
Oh, I mean, what you hope with the Grizzlies is that you get a healthy year out of job, because in the end, I mean, you look at the Pacers. No one would have thought the Pacers would have done what they did. It was spectacular. It was great fun. And what do they have? They got an elite point guard, but it wasn't considered one of the superstars of the league. Now maybe, but now he's hurt, obviously. And they have a big man. And so they built around Tyrese Halliburton and a big man and Pascal Siakam. And then sort of two all-star, borderline all-star, neither one top 10 player in the world. And then they build some really good role players around those two players. And that's enough to succeed if you stay healthy. Now, it's harder in the West than it was in the East because you're up against Oklahoma City and now Houston with Kevin Durant and whatever else. But in the end, the biggest factor here really is health. And is it forever ordained that Ja Morant will not be healthy during the course of the year? Maybe, because maybe the way he's constructed, he just won't ever be healthy. But he is one of the most mesmerizing players in the league. Jaren Jackson is a true, all NBA level player, even if he wasn't ultimately all NBA this year. He is an all NBA big. And so, and Jalen Wells, I think, will be better. Zach Edey, when he's healthy, will be better. Desmond Bane will obviously be missed, but I think there's reasons to be optimistic about the Grizzlies. I think people are more down on the Grizzlies. One of the things we have been spoiled. Like, the Grizzlies have never had a period like a lot of these teams who are just wandering in the desert for like Charlotte right now. Charlotte's just been putrid for forever. The Grizzlies, when they got bad for 2 or 3 years, and boom, they get Ja Morant. They're right back in it. They have made the playoffs most of the years that they've been in Memphis, which is not always typical, particularly in a small market. And they've got a mesmerizing player. And so I think there's plenty of reasons to be good. And I'm interested in Tomas Isolo, that I think he's I don't know. I like the way he communicated. Obviously, who knows? Like, who knows if it was impossible to know? But I'm interested to see what the team looks like under him next year too.
Switching to the Tigers.
Well, the Tigers. The problem is in a way, micro things are pretty good. Penny Hardaway and the basketball Tigers have gone to the tournament 2 straight years. That's pretty good. Memphis football is winning double-digit games like every year now. Like Memphis football was awful when I got here. And now they have a real reputation and a tradition of being good and whatever else. Then you have other things like some of the Olympic sports. The soccer team, and women's soccer team in particular, is really good. They're putting up a new stadium and for the soccer team and for the men's soccer team. Tennis teams in the store. Like, there's lots of things to be excited about. The problem is that at a macro level, once upon a time, Memphis and Ole Miss had roughly the same, when I got here, roughly the same athletic budget, not that different. And now Memphis is dwarfed by Ole Miss because of the way the TV money is carved up. And so I think it's a real challenge and problem for the University of Memphis. And we may, football has never dreamed of national championships, and you just want to be good in your conference and whatever in Memphis football. That's historically been true. Memphis basketball has been able to literally dream about winning national titles. They've been to the national title game twice. They've been to the Final Four multiple times. And you wonder if, as the money disparity gets to be so great, and in the end, recruiting is just coming down to money, if it's going to be possible for Memphis to continue to dream about that level of success in basketball.
Right. As somebody who, I played, but the years have gone by, and when things started to change with NIL and the recruiting and so forth, I think I heard Saban say that's why he got out.
Right.
I got to be honest, I don't know if I understand it anymore. Hey, when I was in college playing, if somebody wanted to pay me for my name and likeness, right. I mean, I guess that would have been great. But that's not why I was in college. I'm not sure I understand the system anymore and how you play the system anymore.
The problem is is when so much money is pouring in, right? It's got to go somewhere. That money will go somewhere. Now, in the NBA, what they do is they say half of it goes to the players and half of it goes to the owners. That's what they do. That's how they come up with the salary cap. The NFL, same thing. That's how they come up. They divide it, whether it's 52%, whatever it is. So if all this money is pouring in, does it make sense that the athlete, a member of the football team like you, gets a scholarship for what they're doing, and the football team, the coach of the football team, gets $15 million a year, defensive coordinator gets $3 million a year, the strength and conditioning coach gets more than $1 million a year, and you're like, I'm paying for a scholarship, like, because the money's going somewhere, and so I think it made sense. Like when I first got here, Larry Finch, who was coach of the Memphis basketball team, he made $350,000. Well, if he's making $350 and the players are getting a scholarship, that seems about, that's what. But all of a sudden, if John Calipari's making $30 million or $15 million, let's say he's not making 30, he's a contract to probably $60 million or whatever it is. But let's say he's making $12 million a year, $15 million a year. And you know why he's really making the money? For his ability to deliver the players. That's really why he's doing it. And the players are just getting a scholarship. That doesn't seem, that to me is out of whack. And so that's the problem. And then you're like, how do you divide up the money? And now they're trying to figure out how to divide up the money without calling the players employees. And so it's this crazy.
That's interesting.
And so it's this crazy. Well, and that's the real complication here, is that if John Morant wants to leave the Grizzlies, he can't because he's under contract. He can't when his contract's up. But if a football player wants to leave the University of Memphis, they can leave tomorrow. And the only reason that Ja is part of a collective bargaining agreement that governs what happens in the NBA. And so, but the only reason that NBA teams are able to get together and have this system is because there's a collective bargaining agreement, which creates a loophole to the antitrust laws. Otherwise, the antitrust laws will say, Memphis, you can't get together with Ole Miss and Alabama and Michigan and put a limit on how much people are playing. That's an antitrust violation. And nor can you put a limit on when people can transfer. That's an antitrust violation. You're not able to conspire with each other to keep people down. The only way you can do that is if it's part of a collective bargaining agreement. And that would require calling them employees. And so college athletes are totally stuck. They can't even have nearly as the college sports is stuck. They can't have as much structure as pro sports has because they refuse to call them employees and have a collective bargaining agreement. And so it's instead just total chaos.
Several questions are just pouring into my head right now on this topic because of my ignorance, or probably more of my lack of interest in learning.
Right. Well, that's the thing. A lot of people's eyes appropriately glaze over and they say, I'll do something else.
It's just, so let's dig into this a little bit. And if maybe it's just for me, fine. But so collective bargaining agreement, actually antitrust, I live in a world of antitrust, Sherman Act.
Right, that sure, yeah.
So I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. I can't get together with the other companies and conspire on pricing. So you've got the NCAA. Mm-hmm. Isn't there something that they can do to put together? I don't know if it's a collective bargaining agreement, but isn't there something that they can do to put something around this thing?
In the end,
or do they need to just stay out?
What's happened is that the NCAA is the group that tried to, all along, come up with regulations and saying you can only transfer this time of year, or you've got to be amateurs, or like the NCAA has tried all along to control this, right? And now the cynic would say they've been trying to do it so the athletes don't get the money and they get the money, or the whatever. But whatever. And so the NCAA, and every time the NCAA tries to defend one of their cases, they get their ass kicked because it's an antitrust violation. The NCAA, if you wanted to go with the people you're competing against and say, we're not going to call ourselves competitors, we're going to call ourselves the Real Estate Association of America or whatever else it is, that wouldn't fly. That just because you call yourself. So in the end, you're not allowed to get together with other entities to make rules that limit the amount of money people can make or the ways that they can move. If you try to restrict your employees and say you can only change jobs in January of every year, otherwise you people got to stay in your same jobs until next January, that would be crazy. And that's what the courts say exactly is the same thing about athletes. So there is a way to do it because under the law, the country wants to have or encourages collective bargaining agreements. So they say, okay, well, that's fine. As long as it is, you can get together and the Bills and the Rams and the Raiders and whatever can conspire with each other as long as the employees are also a part of this and you have a collective bargaining agreement then we'll have an exception to the antitrust laws. But that's the only exception to the antitrust laws. And so unless they're willing to do that, to bring the players in to say, okay, well, you could be a part of this too. We'll figure this out. Yeah, we're conspiring with each other, but you're a part of this too. And so we'll stamp it with an antitrust exemption. The only other way that out of this is, and this may be what happens, it's clearly what's trying to happen now, is college sports administrators can go to Congress and say, this is crazy. We need another exemption for the antitrust laws for college sports. And so it would literally, and so far, Congress has shown no appetite to do that, partly because they got other fish to fry, right? And partly because there are people who push back and say that's un-American and whatever else. But it won't surprise me, like literally the day after this most recent lawsuit settled, where the schools agreed to share revenue with the players in some circumstances, the next day, the commissioner of the SEC was playing golf with President Trump. Because he was immediately went to lobby. Okay, now we need an antitrust exemption. That's what they want. They want an antitrust exemption, so they don't have to have it in the context of collective bargaining agreement.
And it seems to be manifesting itself in different areas too. Like I grew up, it was Pac-10.
Isn't that pathetic?
And now if you were to say, you could ask me right now, who's left in the Pac-10?
No.
I honestly might tell you, I feel like it would be like Oregon State maybe and San Jose State, but I don't even know.
Oregon State, well, now it's growing. It was originally just Oregon State and Washington State.
Washington State, okay.
Were the only two. No, that's why when people criticize the players for being greedy and going after money, my criticism largely is with the universities who tore apart that conference and other conferences. Why the hell is Maryland in the Big Ten? Why is Rutgers in the Big Ten? Like, what is that? What deep traditions? Why aren't Oklahoma and Nebraska in the same conference anymore? What happened there? That was a great things that meant something to people. Tradition that meant something.
Rivalries.
All they did was went for the biggest dollar, and these are entities. These are universities. They're supposed to care about something other than dollars. They're supposed to care about higher. They're supposed to have a sort of a higher approach to life, thinking about things that matter in our society than simply where can I make the best buck. And they totally destroyed the fabric of college sports by ripping up these conferences in the pursuit of dollars. And that's to me. And the point is, even when you get more dollars, all it does is create more chaos for the reasons that I described. But now the money's pouring in. Now every play, like it's a disaster. Now people still watch. People still watch, and they still like going to football games on a Saturday. And I think that speaks to the popularity and durability of it. But I think it's sad
despite itself.
I think it's sad because it's supposed to be. Yes, there's a national appetite and appeal of college sports, but it's also supposed to be local. And whether you're at Purdue or whether you're at Iowa or at the University of New Hampshire, whether you're at Oregon, everyone has their own traditions. Everyone has their own, and it shouldn't,
Yeah. For me, it all started when, because we used to love the bowl weekends, right?
Yeah.
It all started when the Fiesta Bowl became the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. Right. And that's when it to me, it just all, it was like.
So what was your college team growing up?
Well, so Title IX took my team out 4 years after I graduated.
Your
college football team.
Your college football team.
Yeah. The Titans, Tuffy Titans.
Really?
Yeah. I used to have a shirt.
After you graduated?
After 4 years. 4 years, 94, I think. I used to have a shirt that said, Cal State Fullerton Titans undefeated since 1984 or 1994. I can't find it anymore. But that's, to me, it was like, and then, I can't keep up with the conferences. Now the bowl games are too much.
No, it's too much.
And NIL feels so much like a loophole, and I don't know enough about it.
Right.
I just know that these college kids are.
I mean, it's not. They call it NIL like it's name, image, and likeness, but it's a way of just paying players.
It is.
But if they would simply pay players, and they are now in the revenue share, I think it would be. Now, there's problems calling them employees too. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But I think it would simplify it and be honest. That's what we're paying them to play football, and because that is what's happening with NIL. They're paying them to play football. They're not paying them to they go through the charade of let's try them out in front of this car dealership or let's have them do this whatever thing, but it's really to just put money in their pockets. It's paying players.
Yeah. Interesting. So how many? It feels like there's two conferences now.
The only ones that matter really are the ones that matter the most are the Big Ten and the SEC. The ACC is, still meaningful. That's the thing. It used to be, you got to get into a quote unquote Power 5 conference.
Right.
It used to be. And they were all, but now there's the SEC and the Big Ten. And then sure, we're calling them power conferences, but the ACC and the Big 12 are a clear step below that. And then there's all the other conferences below that. And then even within these conferences, Mississippi State is not Alabama and never has been really. Right. But even then there's because you're now the SEC has so much, because the SEC now has Oklahoma in it and Texas in it. What does that do for the Mississippi States of the world who are just pushed further down in the power conferences? Even when you're in the power conference, it's not as much fun as it used to be because now they're so big and there are so many other teams that are so well resourced that I think it's harder to succeed for the bottom half of the SEC too.
Right. Is that the Tigers football? Is that the Tigers' goal, is to get into the Power 5?
It always has been their goal to get into the Power 4, but there's no apparent window for them to get in. There's no feeling that they will. There's no feeling that they will.
Right.
It almost feels like that ship has sailed. Like Louisville, once Memphis's biggest rival, once made it over the wall and got into what was then Big East, I think, whatever. Now they're in the ACC. And so they made it. And Memphis was always like, well, we're going to make it. And now it just doesn't appear there to be, there's a path.
Right.
So now they talk about different things. Maybe one of the things people talk about is that maybe Memphis could be in the Big East for basketball and everything except football. And in the football, they could be in the pack, whatever you want to call it now, which is
it's not even a pack.
Which is 7 teams now because they're taking more teams from
7. Okay.
It's about to be 7 because they're taking teams from the Mountain West. And so, and Memphis maybe could go there as a football only and play. And then you play Boise State and Washington State and Oregon State. And that would be more appealing than what they have now, but it would also be more travel and how much more appealing. So anyway.
And would it help with recruiting and things like that? All right, let's transition a little bit out of sports. And obviously now you have a broader perspective, community with the stories that you're telling, I guess. What has that been like? What does a day look like for you?
Well, it's still different because I do the radio show every morning and it's still mostly a sports talk show. So I get up at 6, I start preparing, I prepare till 9, I do the radio from 9 to 11.
9 to 11, yeah.
And it used to dovetail very well to being a sports writer because I'd go to all the games anyway.
Synergy.
So you'd be at the Grizzlies game the night before and you talk about it that day, or you'd be at the Tigers game, whatever. And so now it honestly is tricky. And partly I did it 2 reasons. One, I just got sick of going to every game, every press conference. And I'd done it for all these years. And so literally some of it was just, I was the other day when Desmond Bain was traded, I was in Colorado and I was about to go on a hike. I was out there for a wedding and I got a text. I was in this little town called Ouray and I got a text about the Desmond Bain trade. And in my former life, I would have had to drop everything and write a column about Desmond Bain from a cafe in Ouray, like whatever. And so I just wanted to somewhat get out of the day-to-day sports writing. But then some of it was like, if I got a few more years of writing here, let's just see what it'd be like to write about other stuff. And so the problem is that day ends at 11, radio ends at 11. I've worked 5 hours at that point. And now I have to go. What I imagined is that in addition to writing human interest stories, I would write stories about the important issues of the day, whether it's criminal justice and how we deal with that in Memphis, or whether it's MLG&W and its struggles, or MATA and at the transportation and its struggles, or whatever the big municipal issues are. I'd weigh in on those too. And what I've realized is that those issues are so big and so complicated. And I'm only I'm already working 5 hours doing this other job. I've just never found it effective. And I'm not someone who just shoots from the hip. I don't just fire off a column at what I'm thinking in 2 hours. I really like to feel like I've mastered a topic before I write about it. So I haven't been, if I'm being honest, as effective at doing that. I really haven't written much about the big issues at all. I've instead mostly written sort of human interest columns. And then big things will happen. I mean, when Fred Smith died, I wrote a column about Fred Smith's passing. But then I'll find a column like the Central High Band thing. So what happened there was there was all this controversy about Dr. Marie Fagans, who was the school board superintendent, being forced out. And everything was people had chosen sides. They mishandled that so badly. So I said, there's got to be some good story to write about. And so I had heard about this jazz band at Central High, and I went down there and I met Ali Liddell, who was the conductor, the band director. And that's just such a great story. It's just this inner city jazz band. There's one guy who runs all the bands, the marching band, the jazz band, all the band, the concert band, all the bands. And other places they'll have 3 different conductors or 3 different people doing different stuff. And he comes at 7 in the morning and then he stays late because a lot of these kids don't have anywhere they can practice. You can't play their trombone in your little apartment, wherever. So, and they get invited to go to this international jazz competition that only 30 bands are invited to in Carnegie Hall. And so I wrote about that, and they didn't have any money to go there. I almost never do this because it's not the kind of thing I do. You could ask people to support something every day, and then they just get weary of it. There's a good cause that I could write about sporting every day. But on this one, I said, let's see if they'd just put up a GoFundMe to try to raise $30,000 or something to get the band to New York. And I said, let's see if we can get this done for them. And it was overwhelming. Pretty soon they had $50,000 like donated like that. So then they go to this contest, and it was done on a series of days. First, it was 30 bands get winnowed down to 8, then to 4, and they won the thing. And I literally was driving through the Midwest. I was on a trip when I listened to the streaming of their last number that they were playing in competition. And I swear tears were coming down my eyes. Like they were so great. And it was like, it's like the Hoosiers with trombones. Yeah. Like it was so great. So sometimes, and then the other nice thing is that people, I've been around long enough that people trust me a little bit with their story. So there was a local minister in town who was, he was on a private plane that was flying to Texas with members of his congregation and another church, other members of his staff. And the plane crashed and he was the only survivor. And he had horrific injuries. And not only that, the other people were all on the plane really because he invited him. And so after he'd come back and he had been here for a year, whatever, I don't know, someone just told me I should write about him. And I think other people had asked, but I texted him. And so he sat down and he shared his story with me, and to tell his story, which is incredibly heart-wrenching and meaningful. And so mostly the stories that I've done since I've, transitioned to this writing less about sports have been stories like that. Yeah. Not stories about, why is it that our criminal justice system seems so screwed up. Who really is at fault? Is it the DA? Is it the judges? Is it like what's happened? What is the problem there? Like everyone wants to blame Steve Mulroy. I've never believed it's one person's issue. Right. And, but I don't know enough about it and I honestly don't know that I have enough time or whatever to but when I'm down doing this other job to write about it effectively. That's been my frustration, is that I haven't been as good at that as I would have liked to have been.
I was going to ask you, and you may have already kind of, in a way, answered it, but do stories find you, or do you just find things that move you and you go, all right, let me find the heroes in this city?
I'm always looking for kinds of stories, right? And but now a lot of stories, I get a lot of stories suggested to me, and then I don't write all of them. Yeah. I don't write most of them. I don't write half of them, but like this, Dr. Ken Vaughn, who is the minister who I was talking about, Don DeWeese, who runs Gibson's Donuts, he was in there picking up donuts, and he was telling the story to Don DeWeese, and Don texted me and he said, "You really should write a story about him." That's awesome. And so that's where that came from. And so then I wrote him, and I didn't hear from him for like 3 months. And then he finally said, he wrote me and he said, if you want to talk about it, whatever else. So, but a lot of the best stories are stories that are pitched to me. And then you pick the ones that resonate. I mean, the truth matters, we could write about a St. Jude patient every day of the year, right? But you can't write them all, right? And so you just sort of see which ones resonate. And, but then there are certain types of stories I look for more than others. I mean, I aggressively went out. I was just interested in seeing what's happening in our federal government, how it's being impacted local Memphis organizations. And so I went on Facebook and I said, are any of you feeling effects, good, bad, whatever, to what's happening in Washington? And the folks at Hope House reached out to me. Hope House is a organization that was started by the Junior League that does unbelievable work with HIV in the community. And it is but is largely federally supported. Mm-hmm. And so, but I wanted to find that type of story. And so I went down and I met with folks at Hope House, and they said, this is easily the most terrifying period since they've been ever, that they don't know what funding they're going to have. They don't know what funding is going to dry up. They don't know. And so I wrote about that. So that was one where I was looking for a type of story and found it. And So, but I couldn't have manufactured it. Like if in the end, if they had also told me, listen, the best thing that's happened here, this has been the best thing ever because, for whatever reason, then I could have written that. Yeah. But I just was, so I didn't really go in with an agenda, but I did go in with, okay, this is a different time here. Let's see how it is impacting Memphians.
Right. Well, I certainly appreciate your broadening out and looking at things. I'm probably like a lot of people, like I don't watch the news anymore. Can't. My wife still loves to watch the local news in the morning. And I just wish that they would talk about the positive things, and I think that's why a lot of people don't listen to the news anymore.
Well, I think there's two different things. I think locally, and I know lots of good local news reporters, like Joe Birch came in when FedEx died the other day, and he's sort of been a long time, and he did a magnificent job talking about, giving context about Fred Smith and what he meant here. When we had the temple burned down recently, Joe was there on the scene, and he did I do think it's true though that for me the turnoff with local news is crime.
Yeah,
and it is you can't watch it without. I wouldn't want to move to the city if the city looked like it does on the local news. And then for the national news, it feels like it's just so unbelievably national TV news. It feels like it's so siloed into one camp or the other camp.
Yep.
So there are different problems. Local news is just gore, and national news is siloed into your pick your poison, pick your team. I still read a lot of newspapers, and
do you really?
The problem is you can't read a lot of newspapers. I read the New York Times. I still get the commercial appeal, and I get the commercial appeal, the Daily Memphian, the Washington Post. I get the the New York Times. I get the Atlantic. I did get the Washington Post, but I canceled it recently. So I still read the stuff, and my own little. I do think that. My own little campaign is to get people to actually pay for news, because I do think to some extent you pay for, and it's not free to have. I get pushback occasionally when people will run into one of my stories and there's a paywall, because most of my stories behind a paywall, and I tell them, listen, the Daily Memphian's a nonprofit, that no one's making money off of this. The subscriptions and advertising pay about 2/3 of the bills. The rest of it's purely philanthropically supported. And you can't sustain a staff of 35 to 40 people of journalists here unless, if you don't get people to pay for subscriptions. Right. It just doesn't work. Right. And so, newspapers tried to give the stuff away forever. Now you can get free news, and it tends to be of the type that we were just talking about. So, and it's sort of amazing to me. Like, people will pay for Netflix, they'll pay for $7 coffees at Starbucks, they'll pay for, and yet if you ask them to pay for a journalist, it's outrageous, right? It's somehow outrageous that you would run into that, and it's because for this brief window, it's funny. For centuries, you had to pay for a newspaper. Take your quarter, put it in the side. It was never free, but for a brief window. Most newspapers said, we're just going to put it out there, and it's going to be free, and we're going to collect clicks and see and then they realized we can't make money that way. We can't pay our bills that way. And so most of them, like if you read the Wall Street Journal, it's always had a very hard paywall, and people realize it's quality that they can't get anywhere else. And so they pay for it. But most people, we train people to expect that it should be free. And you can't you certainly couldn't support an operation the size of the Daily Memphian if it were free. Right. You just couldn't. You could have 3 people doing it, but you couldn't have 35.
Yeah. You did give a shout out to Joe Birch, by the way. He fellow Rotarian.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah,
I like him a lot.
No, Joe's great.
You also made me realize. I remember about, I don't know, let's say 10 years. It's probably more like 8, 9. But I remember when streaming was actually really good quality, feasible in the home. And everybody was like, we're going to stick it to these cable companies, man. We're going to stream. We're going to cut the cable. We're going to cut the cord. Right. And now look where we are. We've all got 15 subscriptions.
It's so sad.
We don't remember what show we were watching.
Try to find a game.
Try to find a game. That's a very good point, by the way. So the NCAA tournament, March Madness. it was on like 3 or 4 channels. And then sometimes the NFL's on Amazon. It's like,
oh, you can't figure it out.
There needs to be
and if you can find it, then the problem is you have to pay for it.
You have to pay for it.
Am I paying for Paramount Plus now? Am I paying for, whatever? Am I paying for it?
We sure showed them, didn't we?
Yeah, no, it's awful.
That's funny. So do you have a natural pull towards some of the politics stuff? Not that we need to talk about politics, but do you have a general pull towards that, or that you find
I read
the
political stuff.
Yeah,
I read the political stuff, but I can find it depressing. But I read that. I do read that's what I mostly read. I read politics. I read sports. Those are the main things that I probably traffic in when I'm. But the sad thing is I don't read as many books. Like I literally was, when I was in Colorado, I was flying on a Durango, and they didn't have a bookstore, but they had one of those little, like a free library where people just leaving books. And someone left the John Grisham book. And I don't think he's high art as a writer or whatever else, but he can. And sadly, it's been a while since I finished a book. Like I used to be absolutely, as a kid, avid reader. When we would go on long drives, we'd go down to the bookstore and my mom would pick us, you could pick out one book for the drive, and so I would read and read and read and read and read and read and read. And now I find that all I read is periodicals, right? All I read is on my phone.
Right.
And I don't read books. So I literally had to comment to my wife, Claire, the other day, my God, I finally finished a book. It was this very basic John Grisham book, but it did, maybe it's launched me again. It's been a long time since I've started and finished a book, which is too bad because my library is filled with them.
Well, I'm looking behind you at all these books. I've rekindled book reading myself, actually.
What do you read?
Well, I just finished.
Do you read it on Kindle? Is it literally on Kindle?
I was going to tell you. That's why what made me think of it to tell you, and maybe it would help you, is I like the physical book.
Right.
So I'm still the guy that buys books,
like
those books right there. And I've got 4 or 5 right now that I'm working my way through. Keith Richards' life story. I think it's called Life.
Really?
I love music. Yeah.
So you read nonfiction and you read biography?
I read both. I just finished a very, very long book. We just went to last November, the family. We went on a Mediterranean cruise and spent some time in Rome, just in and out of Rome. You need to be there 6 months. And I bought this book called SPQR, which I didn't even know what that stood for. But it's about Rome.
Really?
And the Romans.
What's it stand for?
Senate, people,
Republic
or something. It's something to do with, and you'll still find, depending on what you see around the world, you'll still find at rallies and things like that in Italy, people with SPQR patches and stuff.
Right.
And I never knew what it was, but it's all about Roman Empire.
I went to Rome on my honeymoon, and I didn't really want to. His ex-wife did, and then I loved it. It's fantastic. I thought it was just going to be this big city, whatever else, but it's fantastic because it's got all the old Roman Colosseum stuff and all that, and then it's got the Vatican stuff and all that, and it's a great, and the food was unbelievably great.
We took a cooking class.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
It's amazing.
Can you still cook what you cooked?
My sons cook. My wife cooks.
I see.
I clean.
Okay, that's good. Well, someone's got to. Probably it's the engine.
But yeah, there's I just read The American Plague. Whoa, if you haven't read that one, it's about yellow fever here in Memphis.
Right. I know that book. I know of the book.
You know of the book? Well,
I
will. On my treat, I'm going to get you the book because it opened my eyes. My grandmother's family came from County Cork in 1868 to Memphis.
1868 to Memphis, really?
Just when it was getting ready to roar. And
getting ready to roar.
About half of them died with yellow fever. The other half ended up in California to get away from it, which is obviously how I ended up.
I'm doing a column just right now. I'm in the midst of it on a woman. She's one of the last sister of Charity of Nazareth. That's it. Sister of Charity of Nazareth. Because after the yellow fever in Memphis, most of the sisters, the nuns who were here, died. They stayed and they died, right? And I think it was Benedictine nuns at the time. And so what happened is there was no one to teach in the schools. So the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, which is Nazareth, Kentucky, were asked to come teach in Memphis. And so they came here in 1884, maybe. And they've been here ever since. Sometimes as many as 130, whatever. They started a whole bunch of Catholic schools in town. They started Holy Rosary. They started and staffed all these, whatever. And they literally were down to Sister Trudy Foster was the last one here, and she left just this past Monday. And that started in 1884, and now the last one left. Partly, and I said, why? Like, she said, well, she's 90. That's why she's going to a retirement convent. And she said American women don't want to, join the sisterhood anymore, particularly. So there's no. And then secondly, lay people, like it's de-educating now. It's not all done by nuns. But that was literally in the wake of the yellow fever. I guess all the nuns were wiped out. And so this new congregation or whatever came and really taught in Memphis for a century and a half.
Right. Wow. How about that? Fascinating book. So I think I'll get, that's going to be my gift to you. I think you'll enjoy it and read it. What do you do for fun? Enough of work.
Oh, I have the dogs, and so Bernese Mountain Dogs. I have the Bernese Mountain Dogs. I got married again 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and I bike, I cycle. I used to run, but my knees kind of gave out. So I used to be the guy who was like, look at those idiots in their Lycra wearing their stretch whatever on their bikes. But then what happens is Claire, my wife, biked. And what happens is you get on the bike and you go 20 miles and you realize your butt hurts, right? And so you got to get the padded pants, right? And then you're like, okay, well, I got the padded pants. I need pockets. So the jersey has a pocket in the back if you get the actual jersey. And of course, you got to have a helmet. I'm not an idiot. So the next thing you know, and then the whole locking in with the cleats that lock in, that intimidates people. But the truth of the matter is it's nothing. It's easy. That's whatever. And it's a much more efficient way to pedal. So the next thing you know, I'm one of those idiots out there. And so I have biked with, there's two big groups in Memphis, the Hightailers and the Major Tailor group and I bike with them some. And it's interesting because you hear that in a peloton, in a big group of bikers, that it's easier, that it is so much easier. You can't believe it. Like, being in a group of 20 cyclists going down the road, it almost picks you up and carries. It's unbelievable. And then if you're at the front, it's a lot of work. It really is. Like I knew theoretically that was true, but until I did it. So I do that some, and I've done some 100-milers now and stuff like that. And so, although I'm becoming now intimidated because lots of people, there's a lot of death feels like it's always an issue. Like both because you're going to get hit by someone who's texting and driving, but also people wipe out. And bike accidents can be no joke. And now I've been more biking on the Green Line and stuff, but mostly between my jobs and I do some Pilates and stuff like that too.
Oh, my wife's hooked.
Oh, really? Yeah. Does she do it with the Reformer, which is a machine? I don't. I do it with just I do hot Pilates, which I never thought I'd do that either. Yeah. But I do hot Pilates, which just is basically planks and elaborate calisthenics. But I do that a couple of times a week. And that's pretty much it. And then, that's pretty much it.
She and my daughter-in-law are hooked. My daughter-in-law sometimes.
Do they go somewhere to do it? Or
Club Pilates just opened up a location in South Haven.
Really?
And sometimes she'll do 2 a day. My daughter-in-law has done 3 classes in one day.
Wow.
Just absolutely
amazing.
They actually have written to Club. If Club Pilates is listening to this, they want to open up. They want to open up a franchise in Hernando, Mississippi.
They should do it.
They wrote them up.
That's great.
But yeah, it
does. It has made a difference. I look better. I feel better since I've started doing it.
Good for you.
Like it does make it. I never thought I would do that, but that's what happens though. When your kids leave the nest, I eat less pizza and I have more time.
Right.
So I'd be able to do things like that.
So I feel like we should wrap up. What is there anything that you? I was going to ask you, like, if you were the king for one day, what would you change in Memphis? But I feel like we've gone down that road pretty good.
Yeah. I'd take away all. I mean, I hate to say it. I'd turn all the guns into plowshares. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I would turn every gun into a plowshare. I let people I'm not coming for anyone's guns.
Right.
But it would be better if it were just, if literally everyone, if we just had guns to go duck hunting with, or whatever and not everyone had a damn handgun in there. Like that's what now I get it. Like people feel like because other people have guns, you got to have whatever. I'm not coming for your gun. Second Amendment allows all that. But if I could waive wouldn't it be great? Like, how about fist fights? Those were fun. Like a fist fight in the old school. Like in the old days, like in my high school, you'd have fist fights. People would meet. They'd have a fist fight in the hall.
They say after third period, I'll meet you over here.
Yeah, exactly. I want every.
I never thought I'd get shot.
I want every. Now you really do. Like you can't play. Also, you can't flip the bird to anyone anymore. You can't
There's no fun in that.
There's no fun in that. You can't honk. You can't flip the bird. You can't whatever. So. That's the problem. That's what I would do. No, to me, it's poverty. I guess I'd get rid of poverty somehow. I'd make sure everybody had enough money to live on and whatever. And then the guns wouldn't be such a problem. So, but it's those two things working in concert. It seems to me, the guns, the poverty, the guns. That's why we are where we are.
Yeah. It's tough. Well, hopefully in our lifetime, we'll see a change.
I'd like a good Cuban restaurant too. If I could, that's another one. I'd like a good Cuban restaurant.
Where do you go? Where do you go now? Absent
There
that.
really is none. There's no good Cuban restaurant. Oh, where do I go? I have two stepsons who work at Catherine and Mary's. I like Catherine and Mary's downtown a lot, but I like all the Kelly English places and Andrew Michaels places, and then the truth matters. There's so much. That's the thing for me. Memphis has enough. I suppose if you're really sophisticated, you would need to live in New York for the culture and the food and whatever else. Memphis has plenty for me. Like I love to go to the Orpheum and see shows at the Orpheum, and I love to go to the Shell and see shows at the Shell. See concerts at the Shell, and there's plenty of good food, whether it's at food trucks or barbecue shops or high-end restaurants or whatever else. Memphis has plenty for me.
I was just there Friday night.
Which place? Where?
The Shell.
At the Shell.
Alejandro Escovedo, I believe is his name. Some call him the godfather of like rock and punk. He's Mexican descent, family of 13 or something, and they're all musicians. And some of them you and I knew, like he would talk about his brothers and sisters. But it was wonderful. Yeah. You're just sitting there on the lawn.
It's nice. It's a nice,
really nice.
Well, thanks for coming.
Absolutely, appreciate it. Yeah,
absolutely. Good to talk to you.